Hi, welcome back to the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. This is Doug O'Brien, your host. And my guest today, I'm very excited to have him on the show. Kevin Allison is the creator of Risk, the storytelling phenomenon, and the author. To be fair, he's probably the editor, compiler of the book, without which it would not exist, because it's a compilation of different people's stories that have been told at different risk events over the years. He also has a teaching forum, teaching part of the risk program that he'll tell you about. The storytelling studio, I think it's called. I have short-term memory loss, forgive me, but at any rate, he's here with us today, and he'll join us in just a second, so stick around. Kevin Allison, this is going to be good. You are listening to the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. Kevin,
hey, good to be here.
It's a privilege. It's such a thrill to have you on the show. It's like doing a little slumming there, are you, Kevin? It's like, well, thank you for coming to our show.
Slumming. No, I love it.
It's great. So, Risk. Tell me. Well, first of all, I didn't get the name of your teaching right.
Yeah. So I started Risk, the Risk podcast and live show in 2009, and it was really, I think I'll learn how to do this storytelling thing by creating a show and podcast in which I have to do it all the time. But then within a couple of months of starting the podcast, it was doing really well. And I thought, I'll bet I could learn more if I started teaching storytelling too. So I started teaching workshops, and within a couple of years, we started the Story Studio. So it's one LLC with two divisions: Risk, the podcast and live show, and then the Story Studio, which is the Story Studio mostly does corporate workshops nowadays. So storytelling for business sorts of things. And we've had a lot of big clients over the years, but of course, the era we're in 2025.
Yes.
All corporations seem to be kind of holding on to their butts right now.
Yeah.
So, let's hope they get eager to be learning things again soon.
And paying money for outside consultants, et cetera. But before we go any further, Kevin, I just have, I wanted to get you on this podcast before you left. You're going away. You're going far, far away. You live in New York right now, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And you're also kind of bi-coastal because you're doing the Risk things in New York and LA.
Well, the show has been bi-coastal because there's a producer on our team who lives out there in LA. So okay. I've sometimes gone out there to do, but not on a regular basis. Yeah. And what happened was 7.5 years ago, I visited Bangkok, Thailand, just for fun, just on a vacation.
Yeah.
And I met an American journalist there, and he said, "Oh, so your business is mostly online, like running your podcast, and even a lot of the teaching you do is already online. You could move here and have a much lower cost of living and keep your business running." They have visas. They have it's nicknamed the digital nomad visa that kind of accommodates for that, so that you can, as long as you're making money overseas online, you're welcome to be a creator over there. So I thought about it for the longest time. And this year I decided to just go for it. I have to admit, I say this to people and I have to qualify it immediately. It's definitely a little bit of a midlife crisis thing, but in a good way. You know what I mean? Like I'm a big fan of Carl Jung, and I always love how toward the end of his life, in his last few decades, he was so much more comfortable in his own skin and kind of like seemed to really enjoy being eccentric or just being himself and all that sort of thing. And I really feel like, hey, I want another adventure. I want to be in a new phase of life where I kind of feel like life itself is a work of art, and I'm just kind of shaking up my ability to see new possibilities by being in a new culture. So
Wow.
that's what I'm doing.
That is so cool, so brave. And it's interesting because I'm a big fan of Carl Jung, but I never really studied much about his life, his own life. I've studied his works, but I didn't know that he did that. I didn't know that he was eccentric. I didn't know much about him as a person.
Yeah, well, people really commented on, oh, he's so much more approachable and fun and all of these things once he was kind of, because he did have that like real like mental break around his mid 40s, I think.
Right.
And then yeah, he became a much more lovable guy, I think.
Huh. Cool. All right. Well, that's great. That's something I did not know. So tell me about risk, this thing that you started all those years ago. And just for the record, I just want to say something publicly here. Kevin, I know that you were kind enough to actually take my course. That's where we met.
Yeah.
You came and took a class of mine that I was teaching with my friend Nick Kemp on called Stories from the Outside In. And you took my storytelling class. And I just like, holy crap, this guy's that's Kevin Allison. But and then I gave you a comment when you were telling the story. I was giving you some critical feedback about something, and you were like, "Oh, nobody's ever said that to me before."
Oh, that's fabulous. Do you remember what it was?
No, I don't. I'm glad you don't either, because I was.
Yeah.
You look so hurt.
I remember being so intrigued by the fact that you were exploring storytelling in that sort of hypnotic, meditative way, because I've always been fascinated in that, in the way that someone was talking about the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey the other day, and I said, oh, that was one of the first for me, one of those first big hypnotic moments for me, because there's about a 15 or so, maybe 20-minute sequence in that movie where all you can hear is the astronauts breathing while he's floating in space.
Yeah, right.
And for me, as like a 12-year-old in the cinema, I just went somewhere else watching that scene. And it really left an impression on me. And then I noticed, my dad used to take me to the opera. And sometimes there were those operas like the Wagner ones that were kind of like, went on forever and your brain just started to like go different places. So I've always been really intrigued by the importance in stories of sometimes going to a deeper place, into a more imaginative or abstract place. And so when I saw that you were teaching that course, and my friend Jan had taken your courses before too, we decided to come on in and we had a blast.
Oh, good. I'm so glad that you have fond memories of it, because it was early on, and it was what we were at the outset of it, much more in the realm of therapeutic storytelling and Ericksonian hypnotic storytelling. It evolved from there, and later we got into just more storytelling, much more along the lines of think of what you have been doing all this time. So tell us, how did you start with Risk, and how did that come to be? Because it's so immensely popular and great. I've gone to several of the live shows, and it's amazingly good. So.
Well, it's funny, I really do credit it to the fact that, I was born in 1970 in Cincinnati, Ohio, into a very like conservative culture, very devoutly Catholic. And I was just super aware that I was gay from pretty much the beginning of consciousness. I like was putting together what that word meant, like by the time I was 4 or 5, and I was very, very aware.
You know the word gay by the time you were 4 or 5?
I was terrified to go to kindergarten when I was 6, because I thought, the other kids, once I'm in a social setting amongst a bunch of other kids, someone might notice that they might figure that out about me. So I was an incredibly precocious kid.
For sure.
and very aware that I had a big secret. And
Mm.
so years later, it was this idea of, oh, this storytelling scene is big in New York, and maybe I could create a show that was a little bit different, that was a little bit more uncensored, where people are kind of feel a little bit more like they're coming out about
Mm.
whatever it is,
Mhm.
so that the stories don't have to be as whitewashed or censored or rough edges polished off, and they don't have to all have happy endings, or there's room for ambiguity. And the way it happened was, when I came to New York when I was 18, I went to NYU to go to film school
Okay.
and got into a sketch comedy group that was a spectacularly, wonderfully talented group of people. We got our own show on MTV within a year of graduating from
Really?
NYU. Yeah.
Wow.
Uh,
That's
the
amazing.
the show is called The State, and and it's funny because we're talking about me moving to Thailand. There's a little bit of nostalgia for The State happening now, and Jim Henson, the folks that make the puppets for the Muppets and all, are
Mhm.
interested in maybe doing a project for us. So I might have to fly back home sooner than I even thought. I would be very grateful if that was true.
Yeah, well, get those frequent flyer miles, baby.
Totally. So I had a blast for 8 years being in this sketch comedy group, and it
Huh.
was all very silly. It was all very kind of like Monty Python-esque silliness.
Yeah.
And for years after The State broke up, I was trying to be crazy, kooky characters on stage alone. I was trying to like do bits kind of like, I guess, Andy Kaufman or something like that. And it just wasn't working as well anymore. And I did a one-man show in 2009, I guess, the very beginning of 2009 in San Francisco. And it was 5 crazy, kooky characters. And a friend of mine who was a member of The State came up to me after the show. He knew that I didn't feel good about how the show had gone. The tech was terrible. Not many people showed up. It was just kind of a misfire of a night. And he said, "How'd you feel?" I said, "I don't feel so great." He said, "Listen, I felt like that whole audience wanted you to drop the act and start talking like yourself. Start telling your own stories. Your own stories are so wild and fascinating. And I think you should just start telling your own stories." And I said, "Oh, that feels like that would be too risky." And he said, "Too risky? Like, do you hear yourself like that?" Cling to that, because that's what audiences would love if they felt like the guy up there was taking a risk. So I flew back to New York City from San Francisco Sketch Fest, and I thought, what's the riskiest story I could tell at a storytelling show? And what I thought of was the 1 week I tried to be a hustler, the 1 week I tried to be a male prostitute, which it's not that risky of a story, because it's a comedy of errors. Like it's a laugh out loud. Oh, okay, this guy is, like Buster Keaton, like this guy
Right.
is in the wrong job. Um, but it still felt really risky to me at the
Yeah,
time because of
sure.
what I was admitting in it. And I told it at a show at the UCB Theater in Chelsea, and I couldn't believe the difference in the energy of what was happening between me and the audience
Huh.
than that one-man show I had just been doing. All of a sudden, every time I thought, oh, I might lose them here because I'm probably going to sound too Midwestern and corny, but then I'd just be myself and they'd lean forward. Or I might think, oh, this part might be too gay or too kinky. It might be too embarrassing. But then they'd lean forward more. The more I felt like I was kind of just facing the fear and being myself anyway,
Mhm.
the more they were reacting, and they loved it. And at the end of that show, I was so electrically lit up. I walked down 8th Avenue it's from, whatever, 23rd Street down to 14th Street to go to the subway. And the whole idea for the podcast occurred to me at that time. I was like, wait a minute, if I created a show where the whole idea was take a risk, step outside your comfort zone, and come out about something. I mean, it could be absolutely ridiculous, a silly, embarrassing moment, or it could be terrifying or beautiful, And I thought I could be a good facilitator of that. And also, it would be a way for me to battle my stage fright, because in the years since the state had broken up, I had this story in my head of, maybe I'm not good enough to be on stage alone. You know what I mean? Like, I used to have people to catch me there when I fell. But once I started telling stories, I might blank out for a moment or something, and then just say to the audience, I blanked out for a moment. What was I just saying? So I was like, the audience is there to catch you if you fall.
Cool. That's great. It's also really it's great to hear the story of your story, your story of your story, because that's really true. People have stories about themselves, of who they are, and et cetera, and that we can change that story.
Yeah, I think that is such a biggie right there, that we're always telling ourselves little stories, and to really kind of embrace maybe choosing a different story, because I have stories also about like the world we're living in, or what future I might be living into. Like all of these things I think are very important to reassess at sometimes, and attempt to see from different angles. And you'll notice that many of the great writers of fiction are really good at that, of like zooming out and being like, okay, how does this other character see what's going on? Or, what what might be going on in the other city? I'm just thinking of A Tale of Two Cities. But yeah, that ability to recognize, hey, there's always a lot of storytelling going on, and you want to be more. You don't want to just be unconsciously telling yourself stories that might be holding you back. Yeah.
No, it's really, really true, and I think that's quite a profound thing. I've been doing a lot of interviews with storytellers recently, because I'm participating in a Woodstock Story Festival in October. And so yesterday I was talking with Peter Blum, who's originating the whole thing, and he was telling me about a statement that one of the other speakers, Louis Mel Madrona, said. He's a wonderful native storyteller. He said that his particular tribe or culture, or whatever, didn't have a thing for psychology. They didn't have psychology because they don't have a word for self. They don't have a word for self. And so that he said, who we are is a collection of stories. And I thought, holy crap, that's a great metaphor, great idea, great thought, great, perhaps reality, that we are, in fact, a collection of stories.
That's incredible. Yeah. And I will say, Risk has been around for 16 years now, and people say, well, are you going to keep it going? And I really feel like it is so good for my own mental health, because hearing other people, what they've been through and how they transcended, or how they learned to look at things from a different perspective. There are so many experiences that I will just never have. Some people will come with medical to talk about medical conditions where I'll be like, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing, and then to start to think, oh wow, what would it be like to not be able to smell, for example. So yeah, I just feel like there's something so healing about sharing our own stories, but also listening, to other people's stories.
Sure. Absolutely. It's a great thing. And, I think that the idea of the risk is so wonderful. I think people, when they're telling a true story about themselves, are inherently risking.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't been on your stage, but I've been on the Moth stage a few times, just telling true stories. I mean, I have to tell the stories usually like 10, 15 times to
Oh, yeah.
myself or whomever in order to not cry half the time.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're just, and the audience, as you said, the audience just go like, yeah, they lean in, they love it. And it is so empowering
Yeah.
to be able to do that, to be able to open up like that and have people go like, cool.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
we want. Yeah.
Storytelling audiences are so much more. They're audiences that you really can rely on more so than, like, say, stand-up audiences, which are often like have their arms
Right.
crossed, like, okay, make us laugh,
Make me laugh.
And of course, another thing that's nice about storytelling shows is they can go from hilarious to making you cry to like making you feel all warm and fuzzy. They can go anywhere that life goes, and that can make marketing them hard sometimes.
Well, that's also true. You curate your shows, right? When a risk show comes up, those stories have been
Absolutely.
decided upon and perhaps honed a bit. You coach them and
Yes. So Risk, we have the core staff is about 9 people. So there's some audio editors and there's some story coaches / producers and my business manager and myself. And yes, we get pitches from people, and then we'll, if we're interested in a story, we'll ask if we can hear a first draft recording from that person and give them notes and start workshopping with them and see if that's working out. And there's various ways now that people can share stories on Risk. There's our stories told live on stage. There's stories that are recorded where it's just the person's voice and music and sound design added.
Oh, wow.
But we also do now conversation style stories where someone might be just telling me a story and I'm reacting in real time. So there's various options kind of depending on what we think would be best for that particular person and that particular story. But it is interesting how there can be reactions to stories that you would never expect. Someone might tell like for example, a very like X-rated kind of kinky story on the show. I remember that happened once, and a woman wrote into me. She was like, I am a Christian mother of 5 in Idaho, and I don't have a kinky bone in my body. But that story had me crying because it reminded me of the way that I used to react emotionally when my mother would do this thing, blah, blah, blah. Like something just totally unrelated to what the story is, but they recognized a pattern of human behavior or feeling or thought in it that really opened something up for them. And I think that that's a beautiful thing too, how unexpected it is that your story might have a surprise for someone for their own psychological growth that you didn't even realize they'd get out of it,
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's also true that that unintended thing is one of the reasons stories are so powerful, but also so kind of interesting. For instance, Ericksonian hypnosis, which is where I started maybe my work. Erickson mostly told stories. And as such, when people would say, oh, how do you do psychotherapy? He'd tell a story about riding a horse. It'd be like these,
Yeah.
And so everybody who was in the room, all these psychiatrists and psychologists and PhD types who were in the room with Erickson would be listening to these stories and going like, I don't know. And they would take their own meaning away from it. So people would start their own versions of this is Ericksonian hypnosis, or this is Ericksonian hypnosis, or this is, and very various different ways of doing Ericksonian hypnosis grew out of that, to the point where it's like some people have no idea really what Ericksonian hypnosis is. But it is really interesting that you can tell stories and people come away with whole different meanings than somebody else listening to the same story, or that you intended the story to have.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing we've started, especially because we're 16 years old now, we've started doing what we call Risk Revisited, where someone who told a story, a decade or so ago that's now considered a classic on Risk, we'll have them back on, and they'll listen to the story with me in real time, like online like this. And then we'll have a conversation about it. Where are you at with that now? Because there are many examples where someone feels like, oh, I don't interpret those events the same way anymore. Now that I'm a parent, or whatever it might be, So that is fascinating too, the way that stories can change over time for us too.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. Tell me, when you say that you listen to these stories and that you teach storytelling, what is it that you teach? How do you I don't know, decide that a story is story worthy for the podcast, or what do you teach people to do when they're crafting a story?
Yeah, the very first place that I encourage people to start is to think in terms of emotions. So when people take a workshop with me, I do a lot of these exercises where I just give prompts, and people have I give everyone 30 seconds or so to write down whatever came to mind, just free association. So I might say something like, oh, a time you just couldn't stop laughing. Whatever comes to mind. Okay, now a time you were beyond nervous. You were actually kind of terrified, and whatever they write down. And it can be, you have to warn people, hey, if something comes up that's a little triggering for you, just ignore it or free associate, move on to the next thing. But what I'm getting at is, what were these moments in your life that you were really kind of emotionally invested in, or that really struck you in some way, where it might be worth revisiting? I think that just like in therapy, the first time you tell a story, when you're kind of workshopping it, I always encourage people to start with their voice rather than typing. So I encourage people to either just speak into a recording device and pretend they're talking to someone, or to literally tell someone your story the first time. And not to be too worried about structure and what the controlling idea is in the beginning, but just to kind of, hey, let's go back. Some part of me seems to want to revisit that because it was emotionally interesting to me. And then in your second rev, you can begin to look more closely at, what in there might have been digression. What doesn't really get me from this point A to point B at the end? What does this journey from point A to where does how I decided to end that? What meaning do I find in that? And then once you're kind of clear about the arc of change in a story, then you can really start to flesh out the more scenic moments in a story. Like the number one note that we always have to give over and over and over and over and over to everyone who ever pitches us is, okay, these key moments, we need you to meditate back a little bit. What were you wearing? What was the temperature? Do you remember the expression on her face? Did you accidentally make a sound? Was there a weird taste in your mouth? To get literally what actors call sense memory happening, so that the storyteller can begin to create almost a cinematic recreation with words of the most important moments. And another thing is the quickest way for scenic detail is quote people directly, even yourself. In other words, don't say something like, that was the day Dad told me to get out of the house. Say something like, I turned around and he had his finger in my face and he said, buddy, it's time for you to get out of this house, so that we feel like we're hearing a person speaking directly. And you can do it with yourself too. Like, I was walking next to the river and thinking, gosh, I really have to change something about the way I'm doing things, so that it feels like you're hearing me talking to myself. Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. That's neat. So that's the number one notice, that they need to have more of a cinematic description.
More sight, sound, smells, taste. I use the 6 senses of the Buddhist: sight, sound, smells, taste, thinking mind details, and feeling body details.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Love it. Love it. But you said not to be too concerned about structure. Do you think about structure at all? Because moth stories are always 5 minutes. You have 5 minutes to go. Risk stories are longer.
They can go. Risk stories really don't have any specific time limit, except for the ones told live on stage. The ones told live on stage, we don't want them to go much over 15 minutes, so to shoot for somewhere between 10 and 18 minutes, say. But no, you're absolutely right. During the second or third drafting, then I think you can start thinking more consciously about structure. I always teach a sort of classic 5-section structure of the setup, the inciting incident, the rising action, the main event or turning point, and the resolution. And that is very helpful to people especially when they're at a point in working on a story where they start to feel like, I keep getting off the beat here. I keep digressing, and I'm not sure if I really need this part or not. Then being a little bit more conscious about some of that structural stuff can really come in handy.
Gotcha. Cool. Do you ever see that Kurt Vonnegut thing about story arcs?
Yeah. That's great. And I love him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, me too. It's funny. When I went to music school in England for a year, and when I came back, I hadn't enough credits to graduate yet. I'd taken so many music classes that I didn't have other credits in order to have graduation. So I missed my official graduation. He was the speaker. He was the commencement speaker at what should have been my graduation. And it has gone down in history as the best graduation speech ever.
I'll be darned. That's amazing.
But yeah, but it should have been there. I could have been. If only I'd taken that math class. But in actual fact, it's funny because he did. That is true. He did speak at my graduation, and he is credited as that. But the one that the speech that they quote as being his speech, he didn't write that speech. That's somebody else, like in Chicago Tribune, wrote this thing, and it is attributed to Kurt Vonnegut, but it's not his. It's not what
it's amazing how much of that happens. The internet, I think, has really taught us about how many quotes or things out there are not exactly who you think said it, or it's a different. It's been someone's changed it a little bit. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. So if somebody, this podcast that you're on right now is called the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. And most of the listeners, I'm assuming, are coaches. I actually don't really know who's tuning in, but that's what it's designed for. In my imagination, I'm speaking to somebody who is either already a coach or wants to be a coach. And so stories are often very useful, as of course in therapy and everything else, but it's often very, very useful in coaching. So if you were to speak as the expert of stories that you are to a group of coaches to say, how can they learn, like even just one solid morsel of wisdom from Kevin Allison, what about storytelling and how it can be used in coaching or whatever? What would you say? I know that's a trick question or whatever, but what would you say?
Well, I think that especially when it comes to coaching, that that whole process of, it's very similar to therapy, that if you do ask someone, like the first thing that I ask people when they take my workshop, my online workshops, is start off with a short story. Start off, tell me a story that's not going to be longer than 3 minutes, and have that story show me in action some part of yourself that I might not have guessed at first, some part of yourself that you might not even reveal to someone on a first date. You know, you might be like, oh, I don't know if they're ready to know this about me or whatnot. And that is always really fascinating, because oftentimes I think the moth is very clever, actually, to have that 5-minute limit for their slams, because that really does force you to zero in on something quite essential, you know, so that you don't lose the forest for the trees. And I think that is a beautiful little way to start a conversation with someone. It's so funny. I had a storytelling coaching session with this gal who is a labor organizer. And it was an hour-long session, and it was really great. And she was a wonderful gal. And her whole thing was that she wanted to be able to tell the stories of various workers into whoever she wanted to tell it to. And about halfway through the session, I said, could you tell me about a 3-minute story about yourself? As like, tell me a story that shows you maybe becoming a labor organizer, or something about your relationship to the work that you do. Pick a moment that really shows how meaningful that is to you. And she was like, oh, I don't know the value of that. People do get rather shy. And then she started telling me this story that was the most moving thing I'd heard her do in our whole session together. And it really got me feeling like, oh, you got me on your team now. Now I get you. I get what you're about, and I want to join your effort here. And I said, you can pull that 3-minute story out of your pocket anytime you want. You can pull it out of your pocket talking to the workers themselves to get them on your team, you know? So yeah, I think that there is really some great value in seeking stories from people. You know, like, tell me about a time is usually a really like great little way to get a story out of someone, or just to bring to mind what you want to do is, and Matthew Dix talks about this in his book Storyworthy. It really helps people if you start with location, you know, to make sure you're okay. So something happened someplace, and then that helps people. And it's the cinematic thing again, you know. But yeah, I think that I always enjoy that whole thing of asking people, tell me a 3-minute story that really shows a side of yourself that I wouldn't have guessed upon first meeting you. And it's a really lovely way of like getting to some essential part of a person.
Nice. Cool. Beautiful. So yeah, I can see where that would be really useful coaching question, and even something that they could come back next week and have a presentation for if you're doing coaching over and over again. Nice. Thank you very much. That's beautiful. How much studying of stories have you read Matthew Dix's book? Yeah, of course you've read my book, because you
I'm in it.
You're in my book. That's a really nice drawing, by the way. Yeah. So have you done a lot of study of it, or you just sort of learned it as you went?
Well, there has been a lot of learning by doing. I mean, it's funny because storytelling shows up everywhere. I went to film school at NYU, so I did have to take dramatic writing classes. I did eventually end up studying comedic improv and sketch comedy, which is written comedy. The sketches tend to tell little stories in the forms of scenes.
Did you ever
Um,
do Robert McKee's story? Word the
oh
story?
God, yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that book. But it's
Did you ever
and
do
he's such
the
a
workshop?
character. Oh, I
Did
never
you-
did his workshop. I just read his book. Yeah, 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 yeah.
I did his workshop.
Was that fun?
It was fun. It was really. I felt like I was in a movie the whole time. You know?
Yeah. Well,
But
there is a fictional version of him in the movie
I know
adaptation. Yeah.
adaptation. I know, and he likes that. He really he picked the actor to play him. They gave
Oh,
him.
that's fabulous.
So I want that guy, and he did a great job. It's a very close adaptation.
Amazing.
Yeah, but that's interesting because his structure of stories, if you will, is to say that in a long form story, that each scene in a movie has to have some emotional change. It has to go from
Mm-hmm.
positive to negative, or negative to positive, or one thing or other. There has to be a reason for that scene to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Moves you on that little arc, and it seems like each of those little scenes can be like a little story into itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Little
Almost
collection
like
of
little micro stories adding up to, and then an act can almost feel like a bigger story, and then 3 acts, an even
stories.
bigger story. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Do you think in those terms when you do like a 15-minute story as opposed to a 5-minute moth story?
I don't start thinking that way. I don't start consciously thinking that way. The first time I get it out of myself, I like to just let it come out however it comes out. Um, but I think that I have so taken all of that in over the years, like all of the reading about storytelling and just all of the doing of it. I think it's so kind of hard. Well, it's actually kind of psychologically hardwired in all of us to
Mm,
begin with,
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I try not to think so specifically of formula at first. And this is where Matthew Dix, who's a friend of mine, this is where he and I differ. He is a big believer in formula
Mm.
and is very, very meticulous about making sure you check off this box and then turn around that corner and use this technique to get out of that part. And I'm usually more of a no, let it come out the way it came out at first. And then you can start thinking of, okay, wait, what have I learned in classes that I can use here as tools to tweak it in any parts that feel a little like it's not working as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Obviously, he's had great success with his formula, which I like a lot, use a lot. But it is also true that when it comes to improv and people telling of stories, that there's a whole variety of different ways of going about it. But I think a lot of it boils down to having that emotional connection with the person telling the story, and ability to let it out there. I remember I've told this story before, but there was a woman comedian. I used to go to Tony Robbins events. I was a trainer for Tony Robbins. I took his NLP stuff before I even did hypnosis and stuff back in '85. But he would have these long, like 2-week long trainings, 2-week, intense 12, 15-hour days, like intense workshops all day long. And then somewhere around day 12, he would, or 10 maybe, he would break things up a little bit, and he'd have a comedian come in and just have a night off. We just and had some great people in there. I mean, just amazing people. But this one woman came in. She was very funny. Her name was Kathy Buckley, and she was deaf.
Oh.
And she had a lot of very funny bits about being deaf, and it was good. It was great. I was like, wow, fantastic. But then Tony gets up on stage with her and says, "Oh, tell me, how did you get into comedy? And what's your story?" And she started telling her story, and it was like, oh my God, it was so moving.
Yeah.
They didn't know she was deaf. They thought she was retarded when she was a little girl. So they put her in a school for retarded people, and she loved it there. She really thrived. But then they said, "Oh, she's not retarded. She's deaf." So then they put her in the deaf school, and it was really horrible. She was
fascinating.
She was killed. She was run over. She was sleeping on the beach, run away from home or something like that. She was sleeping on a beach in LA area, and she got run over by like a sand dune buggy, sand,
Oh my
and
God.
and she had this like vision of this little guy coming along, said, "You're not supposed to be dead yet." And he like twisted her head and she was like, "I'm back in my body." And so it was this incredible story. Then she got cancer. I mean, all these things were happening and she was crying. Everybody was crying. There was not a dry eye in the house. I'm not kidding. That's not an exaggeration. It was just like this emotional thing, but she never stopped talking. She was able to, throughout all of that, verbalize all these emotions and just let them out. And people were like, "Oh my God." It was amazing. I have no idea if there was any structure to that story at all, but oh my God, it was amazing.
That's phenomenal. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. You talked earlier, I don't remember if it was before we started or in the recording here, you talked about having to do something over and over so that you don't start crying when you're on the moth. And I'm actually okay if a person starts crying a little bit or something like that, because it resonates even more with us when we feel like the storyteller is really emotionally present to what they're talking about.
Yeah. No, I'm with you entirely, but I don't want to have to stop.
Oh, totally. I get that too. You don't want to have to like
lose
control.
5 minutes later, oh, okay, so what I was saying.
Lord.
So we're out of time. Oh my God, this time has flown by. I can't even believe it. Risk.com, is it?
It's Risk is anywhere you get your audio podcasts.
Okay.
Our website is risk-show.com. And then on all the socials, we're at Risk Show. So some of our content is also on YouTube, even though it's mostly an audio podcast. And so that channel would be Risk Show. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And if people wanted to get hold of you, is there a way that they can do that?
Yeah, on all the socials, Twitter, Instagram, I'm at the Kevin Allison. There's another Kevin Allison who is, especially on Twitter, is constantly getting messages that are meant for me. So I chose the
Kevin Allison. Well, when are you leaving for
September 22nd, so very soon.
So I don't know if the show will be aired before you go, but have a wonderful, wonderful new chapter of your life over there and come back. I'm sure you'll be back.
Oh, yeah, of course. And hopefully I'll have lots of new stories, and I'll hopefully meet lots of new storytellers over there.
No doubt. No doubt about it. Okay. Well, thank you very, very, very much for being here.
Thank you. This is a pleasure.
Thanks for all that you do for the world of storytelling. It's brilliant.
Amazing. Thank you.
This has been the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure seeing you again. Hope to see you again real soon. Come back next week when we have another gripping and exciting episode of the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. And if you want to, you can find out more about us, each and every one of us, at essentialcoachingskills.com. Thanks.